Just a quick reminder, the YouTube algorithm is a strange beast, and you might never find this channel again. If you liked this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss another one.
In a time long since past, a time of myth and shadow, long before mankind had clawed its way to the stars, before the very concept of an imperium of man was a whisper on the wind, and before the galaxy was torn asunder by the Age of Strife, Terra was a world much like any other. It was a blue-green jewel, vibrant and alive, yet locked in its own primal, savage wars. Humanity was scattered, a collection of fragile tribes and fledgling city-states, utterly unaware of the greater, existential dangers lurking just beyond the veil of their perception. They were a young race, full of potential, anger, hope, and despair. And in the immaterial dimension known as the warp, that potential was a scent on the wind. That emotional energy was a feast in the making. This, then, was the paradox of humanity's dawn. Yet even in that nascent age, a threat loomed. It was a cancer in the heart of reality, a dimension of pure psychic energy that mirrored the emotions of all living things. This was the immaterium, the ether, the sea of souls, the warp. The warp was not merely the void through which, one day, human ships would tear their way across the stars. It was a realm of pure thought, raw energy, and unbound emotion. It was a place where nightmares took form, where dreams could kill, and where dark gods fed on the souls of the living. Humanity, with its burgeoning psychic potential, its growing numbers, and its intense, violent passions, was becoming increasingly vulnerable. The species was a psychic beacon, shining in the dark. And in that darkness, ancient things began to stir. The great, ruinous powers, the chaos gods, had sensed the bright, flickering light of humanity. Khorne, the god of rage and slaughter. Tzeentch, the architect of fate and change. Nurgle, the lord of decay and despair. And the nascent, dreaming Slaanesh, the prince of excess, who was not yet born, but whose coming was an inevitable stain upon the future. They had all begun to hunger for humanity's destruction. The latent psychic power of this new, vibrant race would fuel their eternal great game. Humanity's souls would become their dominion. It was in this time, a time of dread and unfulfilled prophecy, more than 38,000 years before the rise of the Imperium, that the Emperor was born. He was not born by accident. His arrival was not a simple matter of chance or biological quirk. His genesis was the culmination of a great and ancient ritual, a desperate, world-spanning act of collective sacrifice. The birth of the Emperor of mankind was no ordinary event. His creation was a convergence of ancient powers and desperate wills, woven into the very fabric of time, bound together in a singular, breathtaking purpose. His origin lies not in the stars, but in the soil of primitive Terra. He was born when humanity was young and untamed, when mankind was still struggling to find its place in a world that was dangerous, unforgiving, and magical. He was born not as an accident of evolution, but as a deliberate act of creation, a consolidated soul, a beacon of hope designed, forged, and willed into existence to shield humanity from the ever-present, ever-growing threat of the warp. To understand his birth, we must look back even further to the very dawn of human consciousness. Long before humanity understood the stars or the mysteries of the immaterium, there existed a select, gifted few who could see beyond the veil of reality. These were the shamans. They were the first psychers of the human race. Their connection to the warp was natural, almost symbiotic. It was not the screaming, dangerous power of later millennia. It was a gentle, intuitive connection. They could sense the ebb and flow of the universe's energies, the tides of life and death. They were scattered across early Terra, living among nomadic tribes, whispering in the ears of the first kings, or dwelling in the silence of high mountaintops. They were revered as wise men, prophets, healers, and seers. Their abilities were not born of mutation, but from a deep, primal connection to the natural currents of the world. They healed the sick, guided their tribes, and warded off the spiritual threats that mortals could not see. For uncounted centuries, the shamans served as humanity's silent guardians. Their collective psychic power formed a tenuous but stable bridge between the material world and the psychic tides of the warp. And for a time, this balance held. When a shaman died, their soul would travel into the warp, protected by its own innate power. It would drift for a time in the sea of souls before being reborn, reincarnated into a new human body, to live another life, to accumulate more wisdom, and to continue its watch. It was a peaceful cycle of renewal. But over time, the nature of the warp began to shift. It began to sour. The warp, once a relatively neutral dimension, a realm of chaotic but untamed energy, started to darken. As new sentient races rose and fell across the galaxy, their own powerful, raw emotions, their rage, their despair, their lust, their ambition, began to give shape to new, monstrous entities within the immaterium. These nascent forces, these psychic typhoons of focused emotion, would later become known as the Chaos Gods. They fed off the psychic emissions of intelligent beings. And humanity, with its burgeoning potential and its explosive population growth, became a tempting, delectable prize. As the Chaos Gods grew in power, they sought to influence the material universe. They began to whisper into the minds of mortals, planting the seeds of madness, corruption, and ambition. The shamans, who had once drawn freely from the warp, now found their powers compromised. The Sea of Souls was no longer a place of rest. It was a hunting ground. Each time a shaman died, their spirit, upon returning to the immaterium, now faced a terrible risk. They were no longer safe. Dark, hungry entities lurked in the tides, eager to devour or twist these pure, powerful souls. The peaceful cycle of rebirth was broken. It became a perilous, terrifying journey through a warp that was now teeming with demonic predators. As the centuries passed, the shamans, in their scattered councils, realized the full, horrifying extent of the threat. Each generation was weaker than the last. Their connection to the warp, once a source of wisdom, was becoming more hazardous. What had once been a cycle of reincarnation became an unbearable burden. Fewer and fewer shamans were being reborn. Those who did manage to return were diminished, their powers lessened, their minds broken or tainted by the corruption they had encountered in death. Their souls were being consumed. In their shared, fevered visions, the shamans saw what would happen if the Chaos Gods were allowed to grow unchecked. They saw a future where humanity would be consumed from within, enslaved by its own latent psychic potential, a resource to be harvested by dark, laughing powers. The shamans knew that without intervention, the Chaos Gods would eventually corrupt the entirety of humanity, turning the species into a plaything for their own malevolent designs. This was not just a matter of survival for the shamans themselves. It was for the very fate of the human soul. Faced with the prospect of their own extinction and the damnation of their race, the shamans convened in secret across the globe. Their tribes and civilizations were scattered. Their languages and cultures were different, but they shared a common, terrifying understanding of the threat they faced. They knew they could no longer be reborn. They knew their individual lights were too dim to fight the growing storm. The only way to protect humanity, they concluded, was to create a new being, a being of such immense power, such singular purity and focus, that he could shield humanity from the predations of chaos. A figure who could lead and protect the species, not just in the material realm, but in the immaterium itself. A true shepherd for mankind. After decades of secret deliberation, of rituals and astral journeys, the shamans devised a desperate final plan. They would all, as one, sacrifice their physical bodies. They would not wait for death to take them, for in death they would be devoured. Instead, they would willingly end their lives in a single, coordinated ritual. And in that moment, they would combine their psychic essence, their wisdom, their power, and their very souls into a single, immortal entity. This new being would be born with the combined wisdom and power of all the shamans. He would be an old soul from the moment of his birth, immune to the simple ravages of the warp and capable of guiding humanity toward a future free from the corruption of chaos. It was a ritual that would require the death of every shaman on Terra, a final, irrevocable act, a gamble of unimaginable proportions. But they believed it was the only way to save humanity. The ritual took place in a secret location, far from the eyes of the nascent tribes and empires of ancient Terra. Thousands of shamans gathered, their numbers drawn from every corner of the world, from frozen ice fields to burning deserts, united in their terrible purpose. They had prepared for years, knowing that their collective death will be the birth of something far greater than themselves. The ritual was both a physical and a psychic event. On the material plane, the shamans gathered in a great, silent circle. They chanted ancient incantations, words of power that had not been spoken for an age. They drew power from the earth beneath their feet and the stars above their heads. Then, as one, they took their own lives. In the warp, their souls, instead of scattering, instead of fleeing, surged forward. They coalesced into a single point of radiant, golden light. A new star was born in the immaterium, a light of pure, positive energy, a beacon of order and will. The warp itself seemed to tremble at the power of the ritual. The chaos gods, sensing the birth of something that could challenge their dominion, surged forward to stop it, to devour this new, magnificent soul. But the shamans were prepared. They had woven their ritual with layers of protection, drawing upon the natural energies of the universe to shield themselves from the predations of the dark gods. As the ritual reached its climax, the combined souls of the shamans, thousands of lifetimes of wisdom, power, and human experience, were fused into a single, immense, and stable psychic entity. In that moment, the Emperor of Mankind was born. His birth was not a dramatic event in the eyes of the mortal world. There were no great cataclysms, no comets in the sky, no mountains splitting asunder. The tribes and empires of Terra continued their petty wars and their daily struggles, unaware of the monumental change that had just occurred. But deep within the warp, the chaos gods recoiled. They had felt the birth of this new power. It was anathema to them. It was a light so bright it burned them. They had felt the birth of something that could rival their power, something immune to their influence. For the first time, they sensed a true, existential threat to their dominion over humanity. The Emperor did not emerge fully formed in golden armor. He did not immediately set out to conquer the world. Instead, he was born as a mortal man in a village in central Anatolia. He was born to a family, lived in a tribe, and grew as a human child. He inherited the combined knowledge, wisdom, and power of thousands of shamans. But he knew, with an ancient certainty, that his true purpose would take millennia to unfold. Humanity was not ready for his leadership. The species needed to grow, to evolve, to experience the hardships that would forge it into a race capable of resisting the lure of chaos. In his earliest years, the Emperor lived among the people of ancient Terra. He moved from tribe to tribe, a silent observer, a perpetual outsider, learning, watching. He witnessed the birth of the first civilizations, the first crude laws, the first cities of mud and brick. And he witnessed the fall of those same empires. He always remained in the shadows. His immense psychic power allowed him to influence events, but he did so subtly, guiding humanity without revealing his true nature. He planted the seeds of knowledge. He fostered the development of agriculture, guiding a hungry tribe to a fertile valley. He whispered the concepts of language and writing into the dreams of a long-dead philosopher. He nudged the development of science and reason. He encouraged leaders to rise who would bring peace and prosperity to their people, though he always ensured that humanity experienced its share of struggles and challenges. For he knew that strength was forged in adversity. For millennia, the Emperor walked the earth as a silent, watchful observer. His presence was unknown to the very people he sought to protect. While his physical form was indistinguishable from that of any other human, he could be short or tall, dark or fair, as he willed. His mind was a vast, unending ocean of knowledge and psychic power. It extended across time and space. He had no need for sleep, nor did he age as others did. His perception of time was far beyond that of mortals. He could experience decades as others might experience mere moments. But rather than dominate, rather than control, the Emperor chose to learn. He understood that his time would come, but humanity needed to evolve on its own terms, to develop its own strength before it could accept the unity he would one day be forced to offer. Thus, the Emperor spent lifetimes observing, shaping, and guiding humanity through its darkest and most triumphant eras. Throughout human history, he took on many identities. He became a part of every culture, every civilization, slipping into the role of warrior, philosopher, craftsman, or healer as necessity dictated. In the ancient empires of Mesopotamia, he was a humble scribe, chronicling the rise of the first human cities, ensuring that the concept of law was codified and preserved. As the pharaohs of Egypt built their mighty pyramids, he walked among them, perhaps as a priest or an architect, whispering wisdom into the ears of kings, ensuring that the spark of civilization, of ambition, did not burn out too soon. He fought alongside warriors in battles that defined the future of empires. He may have stood in the phalanx lines of ancient Greece, or advised a general in the nascent Roman Republic, not to win the war, but to ensure a particular philosophy or piece of knowledge survived the conflict. But just as often, he lived as a simple wanderer, a traveler, content to observe rather than act. He learned the languages of every tribe and nation, becoming fluent in the tongues of peoples now long forgotten. Their entire civilizations turned to dust and memory. He immersed himself in their ways of life, sharing in their triumphs and their sorrows, but never allowing himself to become too attached. For the emperor knew that his purpose was not to rule a single tribe or a single nation, but to guide humanity as a whole, to steer it toward the destiny that awaited it among the stars. The emperor's influence was subtle, a light touch on the tiller of history. His powers, vast and incomprehensible, were often tempered by his near-infinite patience. He would appear as a simple man of wisdom, a scholar, a teacher, or a skilled artisan, nudging humanity in the right direction without ever revealing the full, terrifying extent of his abilities. His hand was light on the wheel of history. He preferred to plant the seeds of progress rather than force his will upon the world. The emperor understood that human nature required conflict and challenge in order to grow. Too much interference, too much help would stunt humanity's development, leaving it weak and dependent. Too little, and the species would be lost to barbarism and the encroaching influence of chaos. His influence extended to some of the most critical moments in human history, though he always remained behind the scenes. In the cradles of civilization, he encouraged the spread of agriculture, teaching early farmers how to work the land, how to domesticate animals, and how to store their grain. This simple act, this stabilization of the food supply, allowed for the rise of cities, where knowledge could accumulate and culture could thrive. He worked among the artisans and engineers of early societies, guiding the creation of roads, aqueducts, and writing systems, innovations that would bind humanity together across vast distances. At times, the emperor found himself at the heart of great empires, where his influence, by necessity, was more direct. As a general in the armies of ancient Greece, he may have fought to preserve the fragile city-states from falling into disunity, understanding that the preservation of knowledge, philosophy, and reason would benefit all of humanity. In the courts of China's warring dynasties, he may have counseled emperors, helping them maintain the delicate balance between order and chaos, ensuring that humanity's cultural and technological achievements would not be lost to the fires of unending war. Yet, for every civilization he helped guide to greatness, the emperor also allowed many to fall. He understood that collapse and renewal were essential parts of humanity's growth. Civilizations that became too decadent, too corrupt, or too stagnant were left to crumble. Their lessons, learned in blood and ash, would serve as warnings for those that would follow. The Emperor's foresight allowed him to witness these rises and falls with an unparalleled, and perhaps lonely, perspective. He understood that even the darkest moments in human history, the most brutal of ages, were necessary steps toward the greater unity he envisioned. But his long walk through history was not merely one of observation and gentle guidance. In the shadowy corners of the world, in the places where mortals dared not tread, the Emperor confronted threats that went unseen by most. He alone could perceive the creeping, insidious influence of the warp. He could see the slow, patient infiltration of dark forces, whispering into the minds of rulers, tyrants, and priests. The Chaos Gods, sensing the Emperor's presence, his anathema, sought to undermine his work. They tempted humans with power, greed, and ambition, creating cults and puppet rulers to sow discord. But the Emperor was vigilant. In countless, unrecorded instances, he intervened to stop these forces from gaining a foothold in the material world. While humanity chronicled its wars of succession and territory, the Emperor was fighting a secret, one-man war for the very soul of the species. While the Emperor lived among mortals, his true war was fought in the shadows. The Chaos Gods were ever watchful, their influence creeping into the minds of men and women, sowing discord and madness. Though they could not touch the Emperor directly, his light was too pure, too strong. Their agents worked tirelessly to corrupt humanity. They turned kings into tyrants, priests into demagogues, and nations into instruments of war and bloodshed. At times, he would intervene directly. There are whispers in the most fragmented, ancient texts of great battles fought in the warp itself, where the Emperor, clad in armor of pure psychic light, faced the twisted demons of chaos in single, spiritual combat. These battles were not seen by mortal eyes. Their effects, however, rippled through history. A tyrant, on the verge of conquering a continent, would suddenly fall ill and die. A great kingdom, built on a foundation of dark worship, would collapse overnight. A seemingly invincible army would be struck down by an unforeseen, inexplicable calamity. These were the Emperor's victories, achieved not through armies or weapons, but through his mastery of the warp and his ability to strike at the very heart of chaos itself. At other times, he would confront corrupted individuals, those whose souls had been tainted by the whispers of the dark gods. These confrontations were often subtle, hidden from the view of ordinary people. A king might find his closest, most trusted advisor suddenly gone. A merchant prince, whose wealth was built on a dark pact, might mysteriously lose his fortune. A heretical cult, preparing to summon a great evil, would be wiped out in a single night by what seemed like divine, fiery intervention. But he was not infallible. He was not omniscient. Even he could not prevent all of humanity's tragedies. He watched, with a heavy heart, as great empires rose and fell. He watched as wars consumed millions of lives. He watched as mankind, again and again, struggled in its own self-imposed darkness. Every death, every act of cruelty was a wound to his heart. But he knew that these were the growing pains of a species that had yet to find its true potential. He could not protect them from every hardship, nor could he shield them from the consequences of their own choices. To do so would be to make them slaves. Yet, through it all, he never wavered in his singular purpose. He knew that one day, humanity would face a threat so great, so overwhelming, that would require his full, unveiled power. Until that day came, he would continue to walk among them, quietly shaping their destiny, preparing them for the great, terrible trials to come. The Emperor's grand plan was not just for Terra or for any single era of humanity. It was for the entire species across all of time and all of space. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that the stars held humanity's future. But he also knew that that future would be fraught with dangers, both from within and from beyond. He could see the future wars. He could see the rise of chaos. He could see the fragmentation of mankind. He could also see the moment, distant but approaching, when he would have to step out of the shadows and lead humanity openly. But for now, he would continue his work in secret, knowing that the time of the Imperium was still far beyond the horizon. For millennia, the Emperor prepared. He watched, he guided, he learned. His enemies in the warp grew stronger, their shadows deepening. The time for subtlety, he knew, was coming to an end. Soon, he would need to reveal himself. Soon, he would need to unify humanity, by force if necessary, before it was too late. But that moment had not yet come. Until then, the Emperor would continue his silent, lonely vigil. The hidden guardian of mankind. The man was patient, for he knew that the galaxy waited for him. His psychic power was perhaps the most awe-inspiring aspect of his nature, though few, if any, truly understood its depth. It was said that his mind could touch every corner of the galaxy, that he could see into the future as easily as a man might look across a room. He could manipulate the present with but a thought. With a focused effort of will, he could bend the very fabric of reality. He could reach into the warp, that realm of madness, and shape it, using its raw energy to influence matter, to heal, to destroy, or to shield. He could influence minds, planting suggestions, or crushing resistance. He could wield forces that lesser beings could never comprehend. His psychic presence alone, even when cloaked, was enough to silence rooms. It filled those in his proximity with either a sense of profound awe or a deep, primal terror, depending on the nature of their own souls. His foresight was not the vague, fractured glimpses of possibility gifted to some human psychers. It was something far more potent, far more vast. The Emperor could see the shifting, shimmering web of time. He could discern the countless, branching futures that lay ahead, sifting through them, identifying the paths that would lead to humanity's survival and those that led to its damnation. It wasn't a perfect, absolute vision. The future was always in flux, a chaotic sea of possibilities. And the Chaos Gods, his great enemies, worked tirelessly to obscure his vision, to muddy the waters, to manipulate events and derail his plans. Yet the Emperor saw further and more clearly than any other being in existence. He was always maneuvering the pieces of the galaxy's vast, complex game with a precision and patience that no one could match. He didn't speak of these abilities, not to the mortals he walked among. They were just another part of him, integrated into the being who had walked among men for millennia. In truth, most of his psychic gifts went unseen. Their effects were felt only in the subtle, downstream ripples of history. A king, bent on a disastrous war, might have a strange, powerful dream that changed his course. A nation on the brink of collapse might find a new, unifying leader where once there was only discord. The Emperor's touch was subtle, for he knew that to rule by raw power alone was to invite ruin. Humanity had to be guided, not controlled. At least, not yet. And then, of course, there was his resistance to chaos. He was the anathema, a force of pure order and will, which lurked in the hearts of men and in the shadows of the warp. The Chaos Gods had long sensed the Emperor's presence, this bright, burning light of defiance. But they could not claim him. They could not corrupt him. His psychic light burned too brightly, a golden, unquenchable fire. It cast them back whenever they tried to reach him, to tempt him, to whisper their lies into his mind. To the forces of the warp, the Emperor was like a blazing sun. He was too brilliant, too pure for their corrupting tendrils to touch. It was not just that he resisted them. He was their antithesis, a being crafted, born, and willed into existence to stand against the very essence of chaos itself. But this resistance came at a cost. The Emperor had to remain forever vigilant, forever watching the thin, fragile line between the material world and the raging tempest of the warp. He could never allow himself to falter, for to slip, even once, would be to invite catastrophe. The Chaos Gods were patient. and they knew that even the mightiest among them could fall. Yet, the emperor never wavered. He carried this burden, just as he carried so many others, with an unyielding, adamantine resolve. Immortality, for him, was not a gift. It was a tool. It was a necessity. The emperor had lived for thousands upon thousands of years, watching as the world around him changed, again and again. While others aged, withered, and died, he remained, unchanging, undiminished. His body was a self-perpetuating miracle, immune to the ravages of time. His cells regenerated faster than they could be destroyed. He had mastered the very secrets of life itself, understanding the mechanisms that govern biology and death. Wounds that would have felled any other being healed in moments. Poison, disease, even the suffocating void of space, none of these could touch him. Yet, his immortality was not a source of pride or joy. The emperor bore it with a quiet, somber dignity. He knew that it was both a gift and a profound curse. For every century he lived, he watched more and more of those he guided, those he may have even come to care for, fall into the grave. He saw the same mistakes repeated generation after generation. He saw the same struggles, the same follies born anew. But it was this perspective, this endless, tragic observation, that gave him the patience to continue. He had learned, long ago, that the progress of humanity could not be rushed. It had to come in its own time, forged in its own fires. Immortality also made him a master of knowledge. With each passing century, the emperor absorbed more information than any mortal mind or any network of minds could ever fathom. His wisdom stretched back to the earliest, forgotten days of Terra's civilization. It encompassed every field of study, every science, every philosophy, every art. His memory held the records of wars fought and lost, of empires risen and fallen, of technologies invented and abandoned. He was a living repository of all human achievement. And yet, even that was not enough to satisfy his thirst for knowledge. He sought always to learn more, to push the boundaries of understanding, so that he could, in time, guide humanity better. If his psychic power and his immortality were formidable, the emperor's skill in warfare was equally, terrifyingly, unmatched. For thousands of years, he had fought in battles of every kind. He had participated in primitive, brutal skirmishes with sticks and stones. He had commanded legions in grand sieges, with walls of iron and fire. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that one day he would command the immense, galaxy-spanning wars that would define the very future of mankind. He had been a general, a soldier, a tactician, and a warrior. He had mastered every aspect of combat, from the personal, bloody intimacy of a knife fight to the vast, cold calculations of strategic, continental warfare. In the heat of battle, the emperor was an unstoppable, terrifying force. His combat prowess was not merely the result of training, though he had perfected every martial art known to man, and many that were not. It was something deeper, something innate. His reflexes were superhuman, faster than thought. His movements were impossibly precise, an economy of motion that was both beautiful and deadly. With a blade, he could fell an enemy with a single contemptuous strike. His skill in hand-to-hand combat was beyond compare. He could see the flow of battle as a conductor sees a symphony, reading his opponent's intentions before they even moved, countering attacks that had not yet been launched. Yet, he never fought for glory. He never fought for personal satisfaction. Every conflict was part of a larger, intricate plan. Every victory was a calculated step toward his ultimate, singular goal. As a general, the emperor commanded legions with the same ease that a master craftsman wields his tools. His strategies were flawless, his logistics perfect. He understood the psychology of war as deeply as its mechanics, knowing precisely when to strike, when to retreat, when to break the will of his enemies, and when to inspire his own forces to impossible, superhuman feats of valor. His armies, when he chose to lead them, fought with a discipline and a unity that reflected his own focused will. For the emperor was not just a commander. He was the very embodiment of purpose on the battlefield. He had led campaigns across ancient Terra, unifying warring tribes and nations under a single banner, only to vanish once the peace was secure. And later, as humanity finally spread to the stars, he knew he would lead the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. The Legions Astartes, the Space Marines. Each one crafted in his image, each one an extension of his indomitable will. But even before the Great Crusade, even before the unification of Terra, the Emperor had fought wars that no one remembered, against enemies that no one knew existed. His battles were not just against human foes, but against the dark forces of the warp, the demonic entities that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality itself. In all things, the Emperor was a being of purpose. His powers, as vast and diverse as they were never used for selfish reasons. Every choice he made, every battle he fought, every life he spared or ended, was driven by a singular, unwavering goal: the survival and the eventual ascension of the human race. He was not a tyrant, though his will was absolute. He did not seek to be worshipped, though many, in their ignorance, came to see him as a god. The Emperor was a guardian, a teacher, a warrior, and a ruler. But above all, he was the last, best hope of mankind, a hope that burned as bright and as cold as the stars themselves, defying the darkness that sought to engulf all. The Emperor's patience was immense, greater than mountains, deeper than oceans. But even his vigilance, his subtle guidance, could not delay the inevitable forever. Humanity, in its arrogance and its brilliance, reached for the stars. It built an empire of wonders, connected by nascent warp drive technology and guided by the first unstable human psychers. For a time, it was a golden age, and then it collapsed. The Age of Strife, a period of unimaginable horror and darkness, gripped the galaxy. The warp, which humanity had used so freely, erupted into a tempest. Massive, churning warp storms raged unchecked across the stars, severing humanity's colonies from one another. Communication ceased. Travel became impossible. Whole systems, cut off from the light of Terra, fell into anarchy. Technology, without the knowledge to maintain it, decayed. Long-isolated worlds slid into barbarism, their populations reverting to savagery or, worse, falling under the sway of alien domination or demonic influence. Across Terra, the very birthplace of humanity, civilization imploded. Techno-barbarian warlords battled for supremacy, ruling over the shattered, irradiated ruins of a once great civilization. Terra had become a wasteland of toxic skies and blood-soaked soil, where cruelty, ambition, and mutation reigned unchecked. It was during this time, this nadir of human existence, that the Emperor, after millennia of observing and subtly guiding, chose to step out of the shadows. His moment had come. When he revealed himself, he did so not as a distant, whispering god, but as a man of unparalleled power and singular, burning vision. His golden armor, it was said, gleamed with the light of a long-lost hope, a stark, brilliant contrast to the grim, broken world that surrounded him. The warlords of Terra, men and women who had ruled their radioactive fiefdoms with iron fists and brutal, casual strength, found themselves utterly powerless before him. They could see it in his eyes, a confidence that did not need to be spoken, a force of will that they could not hope to defy. Some knelt before him, recognizing in him a superiority, a future that they could not resist. Others, blinded by their own power, resisted. They were crushed. To cleanse Terra, the Emperor unleashed his first army of genetically enhanced warriors. These were not the Space Marines of later ages. These were the Thunder Warriors. They were his first soldiers, brutal, immense, and nearly unstoppable. They were created for one purpose, and one purpose only: to conquer Terra. They were living weapons, chemically boosted and psycho-indoctrinated, but they were also tragically flawed, unstable, and short-lived. They were a tool for a specific, bloody job. The Emperor marched them across the blighted continents, tearing down the strongholds of the techno-barbarians, one by one. The world was scorched in blood and fire. But with each brutal victory, Terra inched closer to unity. It was a long, savage campaign lasting decades. But the Emperor's vision never faltered. This was not a campaign of petty conquest or personal glory. It was a mission of salvation, a desperate surgery to bring humanity back from the brink of annihilation. Where there was room for diplomacy, he offered it. He offered peace to those who would bend the knee. Many of the lesser warlords, sensing the inevitability of his triumph, swore fealty to him. And those who showed wisdom, who showed competence, were allowed to keep their positions, now serving a higher, greater cause. But to those who refused, there was only war. In the end, none could resist. The Emperor's superhuman intellect, combined with his sheer, overwhelming force of will, outmaneuvered every enemy. The techno-barbarian warlords of Terra fell. Their fortresses were razed. Their armies were shattered. And in their place, for the first time in millennia, rose a single, unified world. The foundation of a new and final human age. Yet, the unification of Terra was not merely a military feat, it was a rebirth of civilization. Under his guidance, the Mechanicum of Mars, that neighboring bastion of technological knowledge, was brought into alignment. The priests of the machine god, seeing in the Emperor the Omnia, the very physical manifestation of their deity, forged the Treaty of Mars. Their technological expertise, their vast forges, and their legions of warrior constructs would fuel the Emperor's grand ambitions. Ancient knowledge was rediscovered. Great, gleaming cities were rebuilt over the bones of the old. And the fragmented, terrified remnants of humanity's once mighty empire began to stir, to hope once more. With Terra unified, its people organized, and its industry roaring back to life, the Emperor turned his gaze to the stars. He knew that Terra was only the beginning. Humanity had spread far and wide across the galaxy before the Age of Strife. Now those colonies lay in ruins, isolated, lost. Many had fallen to barbarism, to corruption, or worse, to the enslavement of alien Xenos empires. To reunite them, to bring them all back under one banner, to restore the light of humanity across the entire galaxy. This was the Emperor's true goal. This was the Great Crusade. But he knew, with all his wisdom, that he could not do it alone. Long before the final, bloody battles of the Unification Wars were fought, the Emperor had already begun to plan for the next, galaxy-spanning phase of his grand design. Terra would be the cradle, the throne world of his new imperium. But the galaxy was vast, and even the Emperor, for all his power, could not be everywhere at once. He needed generals. He needed lieutenants. He needed beings of immense power who could not only lead his armies, but who could also inspire entire worlds to embrace his vision for humanity. He needed sons. Thus, the Pre-March Project was born. The Emperor, a master of genetic science far beyond anything the Mechanicum could dream of, sought to create beings in his own image. 20 sons, each one crafted from his own genetic code, yet each one unique. Each one embodying a fragment of his own vast strength, his intelligence, his charisma, and his will. These Primarchs would be his generals, his statesmen, his companions. They would lead his new legions, the legions Astartes, into battle, spreading his vision and his imperium across the galaxy. Each Primarch was designed to excel in different aspects of war and leadership, reflecting the many, complex facets of the Emperor's own mind. Some would be warriors of unparalleled skill. Others would be peerless strategists, noble statesmen, or grim castellans. Together, they would be the perfect, superhuman instruments to unite humanity under the single banner of the Imperium. It was his greatest work, his greatest hope. However, before the Primarchs could be fully realized, before they could awaken from their gestation capsules deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, catastrophe struck. The forces of chaos, his eternal enemies, sensing the Emperor's plan, acted to thwart him. They saw in the Primarchs not only the instruments of humanity's salvation, but 20 new, powerful vessels for their own dark designs. In a desperate, swirling vortex of psychic energy, they reached into the Emperor's most secret, most secure gene laboratories. They did not destroy the infant Primarchs. Instead, they scattered them, flinging their capsules through the immaterium across the vastness of the galaxy. The 20 infant Primarchs were scattered to 20 distant, isolated human worlds, where they would grow up in isolation, separated from their father and from each other. The Emperor's vision was shattered, his greatest hope stolen, but it was not destroyed. Despite this crippling setback, the Emperor pressed forward. He had already created the Space Marine Legions, 20 of them. These were legions of genetically enhanced warriors, each one based on the unique genetic template of a corresponding Primarch. Though these sons of Terra were less powerful than the Primarchs themselves, they were still far superior to any ordinary human. They were capable of superhuman feats of strength, endurance, and combat prowess. They were his Astartes. With the legions at his command, loyal and ready, the Emperor set out to reclaim his lost sons and to begin the Great Crusade. With Terra now unified, its industry forged into a mighty war machine, and his armies of Space Marines prepared, the Emperor launched the Great Crusade. It was the most monumental, epic campaign in human history. A campaign to reunite the scattered, lost human worlds of the galaxy. It was an undertaking that required not just overwhelming military might, but a singular, unifying vision that would inspire entire star systems to throw off the chains of their isolation and embrace the cause of the Imperium. The Emperor did not seek to conquer through fear or brute force alone, though the legions of Space Marines were, in battle, an unstoppable, avenging force. The Emperor's primary goal was reunification. He sought to bring about this new human empire through shared purpose. Wherever possible, he sought diplomacy. He offered lost human world a place within the Imperium, a place of safety and prosperity, if they were willing to accept his rule and contribute to the greater good of humanity. In return, these worlds were given protection from the Xenos and the demonic. They were given knowledge, the lost technology of ages past, and they were given the promise of a future, a human future, free from the horrors of chaos and alien threats. But there were many who resisted. Many worlds, isolated for thousands of years, clung fiercely to their independence. Others had fallen to the worship of dark, alien masters. Others still were ruled by tyrants who would not give up their power. To these worlds, the Emperor brought war. His Space Marine legions descended like avenging angels, their armor gleaming, their bolters roaring. They swept aside anti-human armies, brought tyrants to their knees, and purged the influence of chaos and Xenos wherever it was found. The Emperor himself often led these campaigns, standing at the forefront of the battle. He was a golden, radiant figure, and his mere presence on the battlefield could turn the tide of the most desperate war. As the Great Crusade spread across the stars, like a fire consuming the darkness, the Emperor began to recover his lost sons. Each Primarch, once an isolated infant, had grown into a figure of immense power in their own right, shaped and sometimes scarred by the worlds they had been cast upon. Some had become kings, others warlords, some were slaves, and still others had embraced philosophies that mirrored the Emperor's own ideals. One by one, the Emperor found them. He found Horus on the grim, industrial world of Chthoniya. He found Leman Russ on the death world of Fenris. He found Robot Gilliman on the civilized world of Makridge. He found Ongron in chains, a gladiator on a world of brutal tyrants. And with each Primarch restored to his side, the strength of the Imperium grew. The legions, once commanded by Terran-born masters, were now given over to their genetic fathers. The purpose of the legions was sharpened, their strength redoubled. Each Primarch brought their own unique skills, their own personality to the battlefield. They embodied the different, complex aspects of the Emperor's grand vision. Some, like Horus and Sanguinius, inspired their troops with unmatched, blinding charisma. Others, like Perturabo and Robot Gilliman, were masters of cold, precise strategy, logistics, and siegecraft. Together, they formed the core of the Emperor's war effort. They led the Great Crusade with a relentless, unstoppable drive toward victory. The Great Crusade was not just a war of conquest. It was a campaign of reclamation. The Emperor's vision was one of unity, of bringing all of humanity under a single, benevolent, guiding banner. But it was also a vision of enlightenment. The Imperium was not just to be a military power. It was to be a beacon of knowledge, of science, and of progress. With each world that was brought into the fold, the Emperor sought to restore the lost knowledge of humanity, rebuilding the great, forgotten technologies of the Dark Age of technology. For decades, the Great Crusade pushed forward. It reclaimed thousands upon thousands of worlds. It forged a new, galaxy-spanning empire from the ashes of the old. The Emperor's dream of a united humanity was, at last, becoming a reality. It stood as a testament to his singular, unbending vision and his indomitable will. The legions, led by their godlike primarchs, became legendary. Their victories were spoken of in awe, from one end of the galaxy to the other. Yet, even as the Imperium expanded, new shadows loomed on the horizon. The forces of chaos, though driven back, though denied their prize, had not been defeated. The galaxy was vast, and many lost worlds harbored ancient secrets and new, terrifying dangers that even the Emperor's foresight could not perfectly predict. The Great Crusade was a time of unprecedented triumph, but it was also a time of great and growing peril. Still, the Emperor pressed on. His dream of a united humanity was closer than ever, and the Imperium, under his guidance, stood as a shining, golden beacon in the suffocating darkness of the galaxy. But the Emperor knew that even greater challenges lay ahead, challenges that would test the very foundations of his vision for mankind. As the Great Crusade pressed forward, expanding the Imperium and reclaiming the lost, scattered worlds of humanity, the Emperor's mind was always on the future. It was a future far beyond the battles being fought in the present. His vision for humanity was grander than mere survival. It was greater than the simple, political unification of scattered planets. It was a future in which humanity would transcend its limitations. A future where humanity would rise above the dangers of the warp and the dark, parasitic gods that lurked within it. His plans were as ambitious as they were secretive. For the Emperor knew, with his vast intellect, that revealing the full scope of his intentions too soon, even to his beloved sons, could invite disaster. The galaxy, in his own species, was not yet ready to understand the true depths of his vision. At the core of the Emperor's grand plan was the belief that humanity was destined for psychic ascension, a future in which they would become the undisputed and enlightened masters of the galaxy, free from the corrupting, malignant influence of the warp and the predations of the chaos gods. The Emperor had always seen humanity as the greatest of all species, possessing a potential, a flexibility, and a drive that could surpass even the most ancient and powerful Xenos empires. But this potential could only be realized if humanity could free itself from the shackles of superstition, fear, and the malevolent entities that fed upon those very human emotions. The Emperor, more than any other being, had long observed the devastating effects of the warp on sentient life. He knew, intimately, that the chaos gods thrived on belief. They fed on the unchecked, raw emotions of mortals. Khorne fed on bloodlust, rage, and the warrior's pride. Tzeentch fed on ambition, the desire for change, and the desperate hope for a different future. Nurgle fed on despair, on stagnation, and the fear of death. And Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, fed on excess, on pride, and on the search for sensation at any cost. These gods were parasites, their power growing with every war, every act of cruelty, every indulgence in greed or lust. And humanity, with its burgeoning psychic potential and its intensely emotional nature, was at risk of becoming the greatest, most gluttonous feast the Chaos Gods had ever known. But the Emperor had a solution. It was a multi-stage plan, one that would take centuries, perhaps millennia, to fully realize. He would lead humanity to a future where they no longer needed to rely on the warp for travel, for communication, or for power. A future where the influence of chaos would be starved into irrelevance. To do this, he would first have to cut humanity off from the very concept of the gods. To protect humanity from the influence of chaos, the Emperor developed and rigorously enforced a philosophical doctrine that would form the very foundation of his new imperium. It was called the Imperial Truth. This was the belief, enforced by law and by the legions, that there were no gods. There were no supernatural powers. There were no demons, no spirits, no souls. There was only science, reason, and the natural, observable, measurable laws of the universe. It was, of course, a lie. The Emperor himself knew, better than anyone, that gods, or at least entities that called themselves gods, existed. He knew, with terrifying certainty, that the warp was real and that it was filled with demonic, sentient evil. But he also knew that belief in these entities, the very act of worship, was what empowered them. The chaos gods fed on worship, on fear, on the subconscious, psychic connections that mortals made between the immaterium and the material world. To deny their existence, to stamp out religion and superstition in all its forms, was to starve the gods of their power. It was an attempt to impose a psychic quarantine on the entire human race. As the Great Crusade spread across the stars, the Emperor enforced the imperial truth with an unwavering, often brutal conviction. On every world that was brought into the fold of the Imperium, the worship of gods, any gods, was forbidden. Temples were torn down. Ancient, holy texts were burned. Priests were silenced, either through re-education or, if they resisted, execution. Entire cultures, some of them thousands of years old, were reshaped to align with the Emperor's vision of a purely secular, rational future. The Emperor's soldiers, particularly his space marines, were indoctrinated with this belief. They were taught that gods were falsehoods, relics of a bygone, ignorant age. They were taught that humanity needed no divine guidance to achieve its greatness. To worship anything other than the Emperor's vision for mankind was heresy. This doctrine was not without its challenges. Many worlds had deeply ingrained religious beliefs, and not all were willing to cast them aside so easily. On such worlds, resistance to the imperial truth was met with overwhelming, tragic force. The Emperor believed that the ends justified the means. If some civilizations had to be destroyed, if entire cultures had to be erased in order to rid humanity of its dangerous dependence on gods and superstition, then so be it. The future of the entire species depended on it. But the Emperor's lie was a dangerous one, even if it was well-intentioned. He knew that the Chaos Gods were not so easily defeated. They were ancient, and they were powerful. And though their strength could be diminished, they could never be fully, permanently destroyed. As long as sentient, emotional beings existed, the warp would exist. And so too would chaos. But the Emperor believed he could, at least, shield humanity from their influence. If not forever, then for long enough to secure a future where humanity could stand enlightened and strong, on its own 2 feet. While the imperial truth served as the philosophical foundation of the Emperor's plan to sever humanity from the warp, it was not enough on its own. The warp, for all its dangers, was still a necessary tool. It was the only means of faster-than-light space travel. Without it, the vast distances between star systems could not be traversed in any reasonable amount of time. The Imperium needed the warp to function, to exist as a cohesive, galaxy-spanning empire. But the Emperor sought a way to eliminate this reliance once and for all. He envisioned a future where humanity could travel the stars without ever touching the raw, chaotic, demon-infested tides of the warp. A future where they would not need to risk their ships, their souls, or their sanity every time they made a jump. This vision led to one of the Emperor's most ambitious and most secretive projects, the Webway Project. The Webway was an ancient, labyrinthine network of tunnels that existed in a dimension between the material world and the warp. It had been created millennia ago by the ancient, dying Eldar race. Unlike the warp, the webway was stable. It was a labyrinth of pathways, a series of tunnels that allowed for instantaneous, safe travel across the galaxy without the dangers of the immaterium. The Emperor, with his vast, unparalleled knowledge of both science and the warp, saw in the webway the key to humanity's ultimate independence from chaos. If he could unlock the secrets of the webway, if he could repair its damaged, ancient tunnels, and, crucially, create a new, human-controlled portal into it, then the Imperium would no longer need to use the warp for travel. The Chaos Gods would be cut off from humanity, their primary food source. Their power would be starved. Their influence would be reduced to a distant, impotent whisper. The Emperor's plan was nothing short of revolutionary, but it was also fraught with terrible risk. The webway, though ancient and powerful, was not without its own dangers. The Eldar had used it for millennia, but even they had lost control of large parts of it, which had become cracked, broken, and infested with demonic entities. The Emperor believed that he, with his immense psychic power, could stabilize the webway. He could fortify it, purging the demonic presence and securing it with his own advanced technology. He envisioned a time when human ships would travel through these stable, golden corridors, free from the warp storms and demonic threats that plague standard warp travel. The Emperor's construction of the webway portal deep beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra was the most closely guarded secret of his reign. Even his sons, the Primarchs, knew little, if anything, of the true, breathtaking extent of the project. The Emperor had entrusted the task to his most loyal Mechanicum allies and to his personal bodyguard, the Adeptus Custodes, who worked day and night, in total secrecy, to bring his vision to life. Deep beneath the surface of Terra, in a vast, hidden cavern, the Emperor himself labored tirelessly. He sat upon a great, golden device, a control nexus that would one day be known as the Golden Throne. From here, he used his immense, galaxy-spanning psychic power to guide the construction, to weave the psychic architecture, and to ensure the webway's stability. But the project was not without its challenges. The webway was ancient and fragile, and the warp's influence was always close at hand. The Emperor could feel the pressure building, the lurking, sentient threat of chaos, waiting, watching for a single misstep, a single moment of weakness. Yet he pressed on. He knew that the webway was the key. It was the only key to humanity's future. If the project succeeded, humanity would be free from the warp. The Chaos Gods would be neutered, and the human race would be set on a path to true, enlightened ascension. But if it failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. As the Emperor worked tirelessly to bring his great, secret plans to fruition, he could feel the threads of fate tightening around him. The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place, and even his immense, near-perfect foresight could not account for every variable. His Primarchs, his beloved sons, were spread across the galaxy, each leading their legions in the Great Crusade. Some, like Rogel Dorn and Sanguinius, were steadfast and loyal. But others were troubled. They were restless. They were beginning to question their father's vision. The forces of chaos, though weakened and denied by the imperial truth, were far from defeated. In the shadows, they whispered. They whispered to those who would listen, planting the seeds of doubt, of anger, of ambition, and of betrayal. The Emperor knew that time was running out. The Webway project had to succeed, and humanity had to be brought to a place where it could stand united without him. He had never intended to rule forever. His goal had always been to lay the foundation for a self-sufficient, enlightened imperium, one that could endure long after he had withdrawn from public life. But fate, as always, had other plans. Even as the Emperor worked in secret, deep beneath the imperial palace, the galaxy around him was changing. The Great Crusade was nearing its zenith. But in the very heart of the Imperium, dark forces were gathering, forces that would challenge everything the Emperor had built, everything he had dreamed of. The threads of fate were tightening, and the Emperor, for all his power, all his wisdom, could feel the storm, the great, terrible storm, coming. He could only hope that his plans would be enough to withstand it. The Emperor had always known that the greatest, most devastating threats to his vision for humanity would not come from alien empires, from without. They would come from within. For all his power, all his foresight, he could not completely shield the hearts and minds of his sons, his beloved Primarchs, from the insidious, corrupting whispers of the warp. And yet, despite all the dangers, despite all his calculations, the Emperor had never anticipated the sheer, soul-crushing scale of the betrayal that was about to unfold. Nor, perhaps, did he ever truly believe that it would come from his most trusted, most beloved son, Horus Lupercal, the War Master of the Imperium, the Emperor's chosen heir, the one son who had been entrusted with the command of the entire Great Crusade in his father's absence. Horus had been everything the Emperor had hoped for in a son. He was a charismatic, brilliant leader. He was a peerless strategist. He was a figure capable of uniting his brother Primarchs, of leading humanity's vast armies to one victory after another across the sea of stars. The Emperor had placed in Horus the highest, most profound of expectations. He had granted him authority over his brothers and had left him to carry the banner of the Imperium, while the Emperor, in his wisdom, withdrew to Terra. He withdrew to work on his secret, all-important webway project. But the seeds of doubt, of resentment, had already taken root. Horus, like many of his brother Primarchs, struggled with the Emperor's sudden, unexplained distance. The Emperor, in his secrecy, had given little, if any, explanation for his withdrawal from the front lines of the Great Crusade. And Horus, burdened by the immense, crushing responsibilities of his new role as War Master, felt abandoned. He, like his brothers, was left to wonder, why did the Emperor no longer fight beside them? Why had he left his sons to wage his war, while he worked in secret, hidden away on Terra? The forces of chaos, ever watchful, always patient, saw their opportunity. They whispered into Horus's mind. They fed his insecurities. They stoked the flames of his pride, his ambition. At first, Horus, strong and loyal, resisted. He believed himself too strong, too devoted, to fall to such base, obvious temptations. But the powers of the warp are insidious. They are subtle. They found the small, hairline cracks in Horus's heart, in his soul, and they began to widen them, day by day, victory by victory. They showed him visions of the future, twisted and false. A future where the Emperor would cast aside his sons, the Primarchs, their purpose served. A future where Horus and his brothers were nothing more than tools, to be discarded for the Emperor's own secret ascension to godhood. They convinced him that the Emperor was a hypocrite, a liar, preaching the imperial truth, preaching reason and atheism, while secretly aspiring to become a god himself. It was a devastating, perfectly crafted lie, and Horus, in his pride, in his doubt, in his pain, believed it. Once he accepted that first, poisonous whisper of chaos, there was no turning back. Horus fell. He was seduced by the power and the dark promises of the ruinous powers. He became their champion, their chosen vessel, the instrument of their will. And in his betrayal, he brought ruin upon the very Imperium he had helped to build. One by one, he turned his fellow Primarchs against the Emperor. Some he corrupted with promises of power. Others he swayed with lies and half-truths, playing on their own festering resentments. What began as discontent, as doubt, as a whisper of rebellion, grew into open, galaxy-spanning civil war. Horus, the Emperor's favored son, his war master, his heir, now stood as his greatest, most terrible enemy. The galaxy was torn apart. The Horus heresy, as it came to be known, shattered the dream of the Imperium. The traitor legions, led by Horus, unleashed a campaign of unimaginable destruction, consuming world after world in fire and blood. Brothers turned on brothers. Astartes fought Astartes. The very foundations of the Imperium trembled, and cracked under the weight of this catastrophic conflict. The Emperor's dream, his grand vision of a united, enlightened humanity, free from the clutches of chaos, was unraveling. The culmination of Horus's betrayal, the climax of his dark campaign, came in the form of a direct, brutal assault on the very heart of the Imperium. On Terra itself, Horus, now fully corrupted, a twisted vessel of chaotic power, led his traitor legions to the gates of the Imperial Palace. The Emperor, who had been laboring tirelessly, desperately, on his Webway project, was forced to abandon his work. The breach of the Webway by Magnus the Red had already shattered that dream, flooding the tunnels beneath the palace with demons. Now, his work was not only interrupted, it was rendered moot. He was forced to prepare for the final, apocalyptic battle. He knew that if Terra fell, if Horus succeeded in his dark coup, then humanity would be doomed. The Chaos Gods would consume everything. The galaxy would be plunged into an eternal, living darkness. The Siege of Terra was the most devastating, brutal conflict in human history. Millions upon millions of soldiers from the remaining loyal legions of Space Marines to the ordinary, mortal troops of the Imperial Army fought and died in a desperate, last-ditch defense of the Emperor's dream. The traitor legions, bolstered by demonic forces and the dark, forbidden sorcery of the warp, assaulted the walls of the Imperial Palace with a relentless, hateful fury. Titans, towering, godlike war machines, clashed with one another in battles that shook the very earth. The skies above Terra, once blue, were filled with the burning, falling wreckage of starships as the loyal and traitor fleets engaged in a brutal final combat. Within the palace, the Emperor marshaled his forces. He directed the defense with an unparalleled, desperate precision. His loyal sons, the remaining Primarchs who had not fallen to chaos, stood by his side. Their legions, battered and bloodied, fought with every last ounce of strength they had left. Rogel Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, Sanguinius, the Angel, Jagatai Khan, the Warhawk, they fought valiantly, but they knew the odds were stacked impossibly against them. The traitor forces were overwhelming, and with each passing day, the defenses of the palace grew weaker. Yet, despite the horrors of the siege, despite the mounting losses, the Emperor did not lose hope. He knew that the fate of all humanity rested on this final, desperate battle, and he prepared himself with a heavy, grieving heart for the inevitable final confrontation. The confrontation with Horus. The Emperor had, perhaps, always believed that Horus, despite his terrible fall, despite his monstrous acts, could be redeemed. But as the siege dragged on, as the blood of billions stained the soil of Terra, it became tragically, terrifyingly clear that only one of them would survive the final confrontation. As the walls of the Imperial Palace finally began to buckle, to crumble under the relentless, chaotic assault, Horus, filled with the dark, arrogant power of chaos, made a bold and fateful move. He lowered the shields of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, which hung in orbit above the burning world. It was a challenge, a final, arrogant invitation for father and son to settle their conflict once and for all. The Emperor, seeing that the moment had come, knew that he had no choice but to confront his fallen son. Accompanied by a handful of his most trusted warriors, including the Primarch Sanguinius, the Emperor teleported aboard Horus's battle barge. There, amidst the twisted, corrupted wreckage of a shattered starship, father and son met for the last, tragic time. Horus had become something unrecognizable. He was no longer the charismatic, noble war master the Emperor had once known and loved. He was now a creature of the warp, his soul twisted, his body warped by the unfiltered influence of the Chaos Gods. His eyes burned with hatred, madness, and a dark, exultant power. His body crackled with raw, dark energy. But there was still, perhaps, something of Horus deep within him. Something that the Emperor, in his grief, could sense. Despite everything, the Emperor still loved his son. He still believed, perhaps foolishly, that Horus could be saved. Horus had no such illusions. He had fully embraced the dark, intoxicating power of chaos, and he had no intention of turning back. The final confrontation between father and son was brutal and horrifyingly swift. Horus, empowered by the full, combined might of the dark gods, struck with a fury that even the Emperor, the master of combat, found difficult to match. The two titans clashed, their blows shaking the very foundations of the ship around them. Each strike from Horus was fueled by the raw, untamed power of the warp, and each counter, each parry from the Emperor, was a desperate, heartbreaking effort to reach the son he had lost. In the end, it was Sanguinius, the angelic Primarch, the noblest of them all, who first faced Horus. Sanguinius, already weary from the long siege, fought valiantly. But he was no match for the War Master's new, demonic strength. Horus killed him. He broke him, and the angel's death sent a psychic shockwave of pure, unadulterated grief through the Emperor. But the loss of Sanguinius also steeled the Emperor's resolve. There was no more room for hope. There was no chance of redemption. Horus, arrogant and triumphant, struck the Emperor with a blow that should have ended him. And for a moment, the Emperor, in his grief, faltered. But in that moment, that terrible, agonizing moment, the Emperor saw the truth. Horus was beyond saving. The son he had loved, the son he had created, was gone, consumed entirely by chaos. With a great, silent, psychic scream of sorrow and resolve, the Emperor unleashed his full, unbridled power. In a single, devastating act of will, he obliterated Horus. He wiped his existence, his very soul, from the warp and from the material world. But the cost was high. The Emperor's body was shattered, broken, burned, and ruined beyond repair. Mortally wounded, his body a smoking, ravaged ruin, the Emperor was brought back to Terra, back to the Imperial Palace, by his last loyal son, Rogaldorn. He was entombed with desperate, frantic haste upon the Golden Throne. The very device, the psychic nexus that had been intended to power his Webway project, was now repurposed. It became his life support, a vast, arcane machine that would keep his physical body alive, but only just. His physical form was ruined. His dream of an enlightened, secular Imperium was in tatters. The Imperium had been saved, but at a terrible, terrible price. The Emperor's dream of a united, enlightened humanity, free from the dark clutches of chaos, had been dealt a grievous, mortal blow. The galaxy was plunged into a new, terrifying darkness. The Imperium, saved from oblivion, was shattered by the brutal civil war. Horus, the favored son, was gone, and with him, it seemed, had died the hope of a future where humanity could stand united as one. The Emperor of mankind, once the most powerful and radiant figure in the galaxy, now sits immobile upon the golden throne of Terra. His body, ravaged beyond repair by the final, desperate battle with Horus, is a broken, mummified shell. He is kept alive only by the arcane, ancient technologies of the throne itself. The being who had once marched across the stars, at the head of humanity's conquering legions, is now little more than a living corpse. His shattered, withered form barely clinging to the last, fading embers of life. But though his body is ruined, his mind, his will, his soul endures. The Emperor, even in his near-death state, continues to exert his indomitable will over the Imperium. He continues, with every last fiber of his being, to hold the darkness at bay. The Golden Throne is a marvel of ancient, lost technology, fused with powerful, esoteric psychic mechanisms. It is all that sustains the Emperor's broken, failing form. Originally intended to serve as the linchpin, the control nexus of his grand Webway project, the throne has been repurposed. It is now a life support system, a prison for the Emperor, keeping him alive in a terrible, agonizing state, suspended forever between life and death. The Emperor is no longer capable of speech. He is no longer capable of movement. His once majestic, perfect frame has been reduced to a withered skeletal husk. His golden armor, now tarnished and fused to his flesh, serves only as a dark, grim reminder of the godlike, radiant figure he once was. Yet, despite his ruined body, the Emperor's psychic presence remains immense. He is far, far from dead. In fact, it is only his immense, unwavering willpower and his galaxy-spanning psychic strength that allows him to endure this living limbo, trapped forever in his own decaying flesh. From the Golden Throne, the Emperor sustains the Astronomicon. This is a psychic beacon, a lighthouse of unimaginable power that stretches across the entire galaxy. It is his mind, his will, shining out from Terra, a single point of golden light in the raging, treacherous tempest of the warp. It is this light, and this light alone, that guides the ships of the Imperium through the tides of the Immaterium. Without the Astronomicon, warp travel would be blind. It would be impossible. The Imperium, its countless worlds separated by uncrossable gulfs of space, would fragment. It would collapse. Its countless, isolated worlds would be left vulnerable and alone to the predations of chaos and the endless, hungry Xenos empires. The cost of this eternal, unending vigil is steep. Every moment the Emperor remains on the throne, he sacrifices more of himself. His body, already crumbling, withers further. His psychic energy, his very life force, is drained as it feeds the Astronomicon's blazing, relentless light. Thousands of human psychers are sacrificed daily to the Golden Throne. Their life force is burned away, consumed by the voracious, arcane machine to fuel the beacon, to supplement the Emperor's fading strength. But even that, the sacrifice of thousands of souls a day, is not enough. The Emperor's existence is a constant, agonizing battle, a moment-to-moment struggle to maintain the light that keeps humanity connected, while his own physical form deteriorates, slowly, inexorably, into dust. To the countless, unnumbered billions of souls across the Imperium, the Emperor is worshipped as a god. His image is everywhere. It is on banners in towering cathedrals, on the lips of priests who preach his divine, holy will. But those who know the truth, his inner circle, the High Lords of Terra, the Guardians of the Throne, they understand the terrible, secret reality. The Emperor is not a god. He is a man who is dying, slowly, agonizingly, inch by inch, over 10,000 years. His once great body is reduced to a corpse, and yet his will, and his will alone, is all that keeps the Imperium and humanity itself from collapsing into oblivion. Though confined to the Golden Throne, though his body is little more than dust and bone, the Emperor's influence still shapes the destiny of mankind. His psychic presence, vast, unyielding, and eternal, extends far beyond his ruined body. Across the raging, chaotic tides of the warp, his mind stretches out, an indomitable adamantine force. He is the lighthouse in the tempest, the shield that prevents the full, overwhelming might of chaos from flooding the galaxy and consuming humanity. His spirit remains locked in an eternal, unseen vigilance. He is constantly battling the demons, the dark gods, that seek to corrupt and destroy his Imperium. The Emperor's continued existence is not passive. Though he can no longer speak, his will is felt. It is felt by the most loyal, the most devout, the most psychically attuned of his servants. He communicates, not in words, but in visions, in dreams, in sudden, inexplicable psychic impressions. He guides those who are sensitive to his presence. Inquisitors, hunting a hidden foe, might feel a sudden, cold certainty. Psychers, on the brink of damnation, might feel a flash of his golden, purging light. Even ordinary, mortal humans, in their darkest hour, might feel his touch, a whisper of direction, a premonition of danger, a surge of unexpected courage. His presence within the warp acts as both a guide and a shield, steering humanity through the darkest of times, reminding them, in their souls, of the terrible, unimaginable price of failure. His most loyal servants, the Adeptus Custodes, his personal, golden-armored bodyguard, never leave his side. These transhuman warriors, the greatest of his creations, remain ever vigilant in the vast, silent halls of the Imperial Palace. They guard their dying master from any who might seek to disturb his long, painful rest. They, along with the High Lords of Terra, ensure that the Emperor's will, as they interpret it, is carried out. They ensure that the Imperium continues to function, even as its ruler languishes forever on the edge of life and death. Yet, the Emperor's influence is not limited to those who stand in awe and sorrow close to him. Across the vast, million-world Imperium, from the far-flung, embattled frontier worlds to the ancient, continent-spanning hives of Terra itself, countless, anonymous individuals carry out the Emperor's will, often without ever knowing it. His psychic presence resonates across the stars, subtly nudging events, shaping the decisions of key figures, influencing the course of history, one small, imperceptible act at a time. The Imperium, fractured, decadent, and beset by enemies on all sides, still marches forward. Its people, its armies, its fleets are driven by the shared, ironclad belief that the Emperor, their God Emperor, watches over them, even from his immobile, silent state. But there is a darker, more desperate side to the Emperor's continued existence. Though his spirit remains strong, the warp presses ever closer. The Chaos Gods, enraged by his survival, by his continued defiance, plot endlessly to break his hold over the Astronomicon. They seek, with every fiber of their being, to extinguish the golden light that keeps their influence at bay. Every moment the Emperor spends on the Golden Throne is a battle. It is not just a battle to sustain the beacon. It is a battle to keep the demonic, howling forces of chaos from breaching the fragile veil between worlds. His mind is locked in an eternal, agonizing struggle, a psychic war fought on a scale that no mortal mind could ever comprehend across the vast, unreal landscapes of the warp itself. And though the Emperor for 10,000 years has remained undefeated, the strain is enormous. Though the Emperor's body is broken, though his empire is fractured and superstitious, his grand, original vision for humanity is not yet dead. Even in his immobile, corpse-like state, the Emperor continues to push humanity, with all his remaining strength, toward its ultimate, intended destiny. His influence remains, though it is felt more subtly now than during the glorious, sunlit days of the Great Crusade. His plan, the ascension of humanity to a state where it can resist the influence of chaos and rule the stars, is still in motion, albeit slowed and twisted by time and tragedy. The Imperium, flawed, brutal, and often monstrous, is the foundation of that plan. It is the vessel, the ark, that carries humanity's future. The Emperor's dream of a united galaxy, free from the taint of chaos, lives on. It lives on, not in the halls of power, but in the hearts of his most devout and perhaps most misunderstood followers. The imperial truth, the doctrine of reason and science, though it has been overshadowed, buried, by the rise of the ecclesiarchy and the universal worship of the Emperor as a god, still exists. It exists in fragments, carried by those few who understand the true, terrifying nature of the warp and the dangers it presents. The dream of a galaxy ruled by reason, free from superstition, is distant. It is, perhaps, an impossible dream, but it is not forgotten. But the Emperor's ultimate goal, the final, decisive confrontation with chaos, has yet to come. His work on the Webway project, though tragically interrupted by the Horus Heresy, remains crucial to his plan. The Webway, if it can ever be fully secured, still offers humanity a path forward, a way to travel the stars, a way to exist, without relying on the corrupting, treacherous influence of the warp. Though the project lies dormant, shattered for now, it is not forgotten. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, the broken, demonic remnants of the Webway Gate remain, and the Emperor's mind, even in its fragmented, agonized state, continues to search endlessly for a solution. There are those within the vast, labyrinthine halls of the Imperium who believe that the Emperor's ultimate ascension is still possible. They believe that he will, one day, rise from the Golden Throne, reborn in a new, powerful form, to lead humanity into a final Golden Age. Others, more cynical, or perhaps more realistic, fear that his death is inevitable. They fear that when he, at last, finally passes from the mortal plane, the Imperium will fall instantly into chaos and ruin. The truth is known only to the Emperor himself, and he remains silent, locked in his eternal, agonizing vigil. For now, the Emperor endures. His mind, his will, is still fighting every second of every day to protect humanity from the horrors of the warp. The golden light of the Astronomicon burns on. It is a beacon of hope for a galaxy that is teetering forever on the edge of destruction. His dream is not yet dead. And as long as the Emperor remains, as long as his light shines, there is still a chance, however faint, however slim, that his vision for humanity's future can be realized. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, as humanity battles endlessly for its own survival, the Emperors will continue to shape the destiny of mankind. It continues to push them ever closer to the final, unavoidable confrontation with the forces of chaos. And so, the Emperor of mankind sits upon his throne, his body shattered, his mind eternal. He watches over his people, his flawed, savage, and beloved children, as they fight for their survival in a galaxy filled with unending darkness. His dream is not yet lost, and as long as his spirit endures, the light of hope for humanity will never be fully extinguished. The Imperium of Man, the colossal, sprawling, galaxy-spanning empire that stands in his name, is the ultimate and most tragic testament to the Emperor's enduring influence. His great crusade 10,000 years ago brought humanity back from the brink of extinction. It scattered the darkness of the Age of Strife. It reunified the shattered, weeping remnants of human civilization under the Emperor's single golden banner. Under his guidance, humanity expanded across the stars, reclaiming lost worlds, driving back the threats of ancient, hostile Xenos empires, and waging a war of enlightenment against the insidious forces of chaos. It was a triumph of will, of vision, of purpose. It was a triumph that should have heralded the dawning of a new, glorious, golden age for mankind. But the Imperium that remains 10,000 years after the Emperor's mortal form was broken in his final, desperate battle with Horus is a far, dark cry from the enlightened, secular society he had envisioned. The Imperium of Man has become a rigid, unyielding, theocratic state. It is ruled by an iron-fisted, labyrinthine bureaucracy that claims, at every turn, to act in the Emperor's holy name. The imperial truth, once the Emperor's guiding core principle, a rejection of all gods, all superstition, in favor of reason, logic, and scientific advancement, has been utterly replaced. It has been replaced by the worship of the Emperor himself as a god. The ecclesiarchy, the vast, powerful, religious arm of the Imperium, presides over a faith that venerates the Emperor as the God-Emperor of mankind, a divine, all-powerful, all-seeing figure whose holy light they preach protects humanity from the darkness of the galaxy. Cathedrals, vast, mountain-sized monuments to his glory, rise from the surface of every imperial world. His image is worshipped with fear and fervor in every corner of the Imperium. Billions upon billions of voices pray to him, each day, offering supplication, tithes, and sacrifices, convinced utterly that it is their faith, their blind devotion, that keeps the darkness at bay. The irony is palpable, is tragic, for the Emperor never, ever wanted to be worshipped. He had fought for millennia to eliminate the very idea of gods. He recognized the inherent existential danger of such beliefs. He knew, better than anyone, how they fed the chaos gods, how they distorted the true, unbound potential of the human race. But in his absence, in his silence, the Imperium, in its fear and its desperation, turned him into the very thing he had sought his entire life to destroy. The Emperor, locked in his eternal, silent vigil on the Golden Throne, watches this unfold, with no way to correct the terrible, twisted course of his own empire. His silence has been interpreted as divine, inscrutable will, and the Imperium of Man has become a grim, Gothic monument to the very superstitions, the very fears he had tried so desperately to eradicate. Yet, despite all of this, the Imperium endures. It is a brutal, authoritarian, xenophobic regime. It is beset on all sides by alien empires, by the ever-present, insidious threat of chaos, and by its own internal decay. But it survives. It is the last, great bulwark against the forces that would see humanity consumed, enslaved, and destroyed by darkness. And in that, at least, the Emperor's legacy remains true. His Imperium, twisted though it has become, is mankind's only, last, and final hope in a galaxy filled with unimaginable, unrelenting horrors. Though the Imperium has drifted so far from his original vision, the Emperor's work is not finished. For 10,000 years, he has remained locked in his state of eternal, living suffering. His mind is still active. His spirit is still fighting, waging the unending, unseen war against chaos. The Golden Throne sustains his body, but it is his will that sustains the Imperium. The Emperor's mind is a bastion, a fortress in the warp. His psychic light, his astronomicon, burns across the galaxy, holding back the tides of chaos that would, otherwise, engulf and overwhelm humanity. This is his long watch, an unending, agonizing vigil where every moment of every day for 10 millennia is spent fending off the demonic forces that seek to corrupt and destroy his empire. Though his body is broken, his soul remains the ultimate, final weapon against the demons and dark gods who long, with an eternal, ravenous hunger for the Imperium's collapse. There are those within the Imperium who still believe the Emperor will, one day, rise again. The legend of the Emperor's return, of a final, glorious ascension to lead humanity into a new, golden age, is a persistent, desperate hope. Some claim that he is merely waiting, biding his time for the right moment, that the Emperor's body will be restored, and that he will, once again, walk among his people. Others believe that his death, should it ever, finally, come, will mark the end of humanity. That when the Emperor, at last, passes from existence, so too will the Imperium fall. For now, the Emperor watches. He guides in subtle, secret ways. He sends visions to his most trusted, most faithful servants, ensuring that the threats facing humanity are met with the full, unwavering, and brutal force of the Imperium's might. But his grand plan, his dream of humanity's true, psychic ascension, remains unfulfilled. The Webway project lies abandoned, a demonic scar beneath the palace. His primarchs, his sons, are scattered, some dead, some missing, others turned to demonic, traitorous monsters. The Imperium itself is fractured, stagnant, and decaying from within. The Emperor knows with a cold, absolute certainty that a final, apocalyptic confrontation with chaos is inevitable, and that when it comes, humanity must be ready. The galaxy teeters on the brink of ruin. The Imperium, vast though it is under constant, unceasing siege. Alien races, like the all-consuming Tyranids, the brutal, savage orcs, and the ancient, soulless Necrons, threaten its borders. The ancient, arrogant Eldar look on, with a mixture of disdain and sorrow, their own great empire long since fallen. But it is chaos, ever present, ever lurking in the warp, that remains the greatest, most existential threat. The Chaos Gods, despite their defeat in the Horus Heresy, have never given up their quest to claim the soul of humanity. Their whispers of corruption, of power, of ambition, of madness continue to spread. And the Imperium, for all its strength, for all its faith, is vulnerable. The galaxy is a dark and brutal place. For the ordinary, unnumbered citizens of the Imperium, life is a grim, short existence, filled with unending toil, with constant, numbing fear, and with blind, desperate faith. Entire worlds are lost to war, consumed by Xenos invasions, or torn apart from within by the insidious, secretive machinations of chaos. Even the Imperium's most powerful, most steadfast institutions, the Inquisition, the Adeptus Astartes, the Mechanicum, are fraught with internal strife, with suspicion, and with decay. The Emperor's great, golden empire, once the shining beacon of human potential, has become a fortress besieged on all sides and crumbling from within. And yet, there is hope. The Emperor's light, his Astronomicon, still shines, however faintly. His will still shapes, however subtly, the destiny of the human race. And even as the galaxy burns, there are those who fight, who die, for the dream he once had. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, remain ever vigilant. They stand their eternal watch over his throne, waiting with boundless patience for the day when their master will rise again. The Space Marines, his Adeptus Astartes, his greatest warriors, still carry out his will, though their numbers dwindle with each passing, bloody century. The future of the galaxy hangs, as it always has, in the balance. Will the Emperor's dream for humanity ever, finally, be realized? Or will the forces of chaos, his ancient, eternal enemies, finally break through and consume all? It is a question that has no answer. At least, not yet. The Imperium stands. But for how long? The light of the Astronomicon still guides humanity's ships through the dark, treacherous tides of the warp. But even that light, one day, could be extinguished. The Emperor's legacy is one of hope, of sacrifice, and of an unyielding, unending adamantine resolve. His Imperium, flawed, battered, and brutal though it may be, is still the last, great bastion of human civilization in a galaxy filled with unimaginable, eternal horrors. And as long as the Emperor remains on the Golden Throne, as long as his will continues to push humanity forward, to fight, to endure, there is still a chance that his dream will, one day, come to fruition. The galaxy waits on the edge of a knife, and the Emperor watches. His long vigil continues, his spirit unbroken, preparing always for the final, terrible battle that will decide the fate of all.